So thanks everyone for attending the afternoon session. Let's go ahead and get started with the Point Solution Prize panel. I'm Jeff Davis with NASA. I'm also the Deputy Director of the Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation. So again, we're very happy to have all of you here today and participating. Thanks for coming, and I hope you'll enjoy this panel. It's a great panel. What I'd like to do, sort of rules of engagement, is very brief introductions. I'm going to ask each panelist to speak for 10 minutes, and then we'll take questions at the end. So I really do want to leave questions for the floor. You've got microphones in various places, so please come to the microphone to ask your question, and we'd like to have a very interactive session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first panel member today, Dr. Alok Das. He is a senior scientist for design innovation at the Air Force Research Laboratory, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. As the laboratory's chief innovation officer, he serves as the principal advisor to the commander in formulating, planning, and implementing technology and process innovation strategies throughout the organization. And I think you'll find his slides and experience very compelling. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Das.
Thank you. Let me see if the clicker works. Can I get my slides up? Oh, there you go. Perfect. So I'm going to talk about two things today. We have a portfolio of things we are doing as part of our innovation pilot. So today I'm going to very quickly cover two things, design challenges, which we are doing, and also award challenges. Those are the first two things I'm going to cover. So I'm going to start with award challenges. So for award challenges, what we have done is we have partnered with Innocentive. You probably have heard about them today already. It's one of the providers of open innovation platform. So we have partnered with Innocentive, and we have been using them to solve open innovation challenges. So basically, in Innocentive language, you are the seeker, you are the person who's looking for a solution. They have a fairly decent platform. They have about 250,000 registered solvers, and you know you've been hearing about that already. And there's a far larger number of people they can reach. They put the problem out, you get solutions in, and you pick the one you want. Obviously, as you've been hearing today, you only pay for what you like. You don't pay for anything else. It's a very effective model, and we have been using it now for the last year or so. So I'll share with you our experience, and I've got stats here on 7 of the problems we ran, just to give you a sense of what occurred. So on the chart there, you can see the 7 problems listed all the way from something called a special ops stretcher to the vehicle stopper, which some people talked about in the morning, to something called a shooter locator. There were 7 specific problems we worked on. And for each one of them, they were open for only 60 days. That's it. So from the time we opened up the problem to the time it closed was just 60 days. And it tells you on the y-axis how many people for each one of them wanted to work on it and how long it took. So the graph on the slides gives you that for most problems we had anything from many hundreds to over thousands people who showed interest, which is what Innocentive says registered for solution. Then there were a few hundred people, a few tens to a few hundred people who actually solved and submitted a full solution. That's a large number. Now, I would grant you that typically a large number of them are junk. There's a fair amount of filtering which you have to do. But then you can get good solutions out of it. And then it shows you on the right what awards we made. We made full awards, partial awards, or no award, depending on what we liked. And you can see the level of the awards. It's usually anything like 10K, 20K, or 25K. So we have found over the last year, if you pose the problem right, if you select the problem right, award challenges or open innovation, the broader field, is extremely efficient way of problem solving. So I'll walk you through 1 or 2 examples. So one of the problems we worked on is this business of fast roping. So in the military, when rescue people are going to go rescue somebody, they actually rope down a rope. They slide down a rope. The helicopter gets them to the neighborhood, they slide down a rope, and what happens is they're wearing a glove, and the rope is a very thick rope, and they're basically using the glove to slow themselves down. What happens is the glove really heats up as they're going down. So two things happen. If you can't handle it, your gloves get too hot, you let go and you fall. Or you continue to use the glove and you burn your hand. So most people either burn their hand or they fall. Neither of them are good solutions. So that was the problem, a very simple problem. And you always have to explain the problem in simple terms. So that was the problem. We wanted to come up with a better material which would allow the person to operate with the glove they have, yet not get hurt. Very, very simple. So we had, amazingly, over 1,000 people from 69 countries who showed interest. We had 182 submissions from 40 countries. So this is a worldwide thing. You can see the map. And we actually awarded 4 partial awards in this case. We didn't really award any one person, but we took pieces from various solutions. And you can do that. You don't have to pick one. And the total award was about $18,000. That's it. So this gives you a sense of what happened. Different people suggested different materials which came back. We contacted the manufacturer of prototype gloves. We have made some gloves. We have started working on the solution and been transitioning them. Very, very effective way of putting the problem out, picking some solutions, and transitioning them. So we have had a really good experience in this area. Another thing we have been doing, and this gives you the total cost, still pretty low. Another thing we have been doing is design challenges. So we conduct 3 different design challenges, and this really, the idea here is to take an interesting problem and have multiple teams compete on it as part of design. So we run 3 challenges. I'll talk about 2 of them a little bit here. One is a university design challenge, where what we have done is we have selected 17 universities from across the country, and as part of their senior design in mechanical engineering, as part of the senior design project, we give them all the same problem to compete. And they use the first semester to work on the design and the second semester to actually make it, and then they all come together in a head-to-head competition. And it's an amazing things happen when you've got young people coming up with new ideas. We do a similar competition among the 3 military academies, Air Force Academy, West Point, and Naval Academy. And you can imagine that gets extremely competitive. When those 3 schools get together, they don't want to lose. So we have found this to be a very efficient way of, first of all, making STEM fun again, science, engineering, technology fun again. Secondly, they do come up with very good solutions. So it works both ways. So just to give you an example, this year, the competition we just ended, we gave the same problem to the military academies and also to the regular schools. So about 20 schools actually, they worked on it. And the problem was a simple solution. We said, just like Batman has a device in his utility belt, he shoots up to the building and then zips up to climb buildings. We said, that's what we want. Very simple and practical problem. Create a device which I can use to climb buildings. And the building wasn't going to be a small building. We had given them the challenge of climbing a 90-foot high wall, a sheer wall which was 90 foot high. And the testing was done on a 90-foot high wall. So it wasn't as if we were giving them something you can go to Home Depot and buy and kind of adapt. And that's the main thing. You don't want to give them something which they can quickly adapt. It has to be a significant challenge, yet not too challenging. Well, after all, they're undergraduate students, even though they're seniors. It was and you can see some of the pictures. I didn't bring some videos. We had actual special operations people using the devices because we didn't want to have the students climb up 90-foot high walls and fall. And one of the climbing device was in fact overpowered. So actually there's a very interesting video which I didn't bring where the special operations person is using it to climb up and he's just shooting up. And he's screaming all the way to the top. He said he's never had a ride that fun. He just shot up the rope because they had not optimized the design. But it's interesting. 3-4 of the schools actually completed the design. I mean, a lot of them have solutions which partially completed the wall climbing, but not all the way. But 3 schools did. Utah State won the competition, so that just to give you a sense of who won. It's interesting that University of Minnesota in Duluth, which is a very small school, came a very close second. In fact, the judges had a hard time selecting the winner because they were that close to each other. And one wouldn't have guessed that University of Minnesota in Duluth would actually do that well. but they nearly won the whole thing. They just had some minor issues. They had the one where the special ops person zoomed up the rope. I mean, just screaming all the way up. We're going to get that video cleared and put out. He's just screaming all the way up. He's having so much fun. But we have found that these design challenges are a very effective way of problem solving. And again, 17 schools tried it out, plus 3 military academies, so 20 schools tried it out, different solutions, different ways of looking at it. And then we're going to take the best of the breed and actually productize it and make something available. So from a lessons learned point of view, here are some of the things which we came up with. You really do have to choose what we call a significant problem or a wicked problem. It can't be too hard, but it cannot be too easy to solve. That's the reason we came up with 90 feet. We actually originally came up with 60 feet. Then we thought somebody could cheat. So we jacked it up to 90 feet. Some of the schools didn't like it, but that's what it was. You have to have a sense of competition. I mean, human beings thrive in competition. We like to win. And so you have to have this sense of rivalry. The 3 military academies, they just love to compete. And so that works very well. There has to be some friction. You need to create that. You need to make it demanding in the sense you have to give them small amount of money or limited time, some way to create friction. Because we work better when we are pushed against the wall, believe it or not. So you got to create that. You have to allow for intense collaboration. So we allowed users to talk to them so that they understood what the problem was. You have to have a realism. So our final competition was done on a real wall. It wasn't fake. It wasn't just a briefing. Here was a 90-foot high wall. Try it out. See what happens. Of course, we had safety ropes during our competition. But still, it was a sheer 90-foot high wall. And you can use it to identify innovative people. You can quickly see who the leaders are in each team. Who's the person who actually made it happen? And that becomes very apparent by just the way they're there. And then, when you get these 15, 16, 17, 20 solutions, it's important to use the best of the breed to combine them and come up with a practical product. And I've got 10 seconds left back for you.
Great. Perfect timing. Thank you very much. And we'll hold questions to the end. Our next speaker is Damien Declercq. He's the Director of New Business Development at Local Motors. Joined the team in early 2011 to run the XC2V program, so he'll have to tell you what that acronym stands for. He is focusing his efforts on the opportunities and partnerships to develop the Local Motors business. And this is the organization that has developed the capability of essentially running challenges to help build automobiles. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Damien.
Thank you very much. I just want to say that I'm honored to be here today at the Department of Transportation, being part of an automotive company, a new car company, and not seeing our competitors here. So I'd like to know who have ever heard about Local Motors. Can you raise your hand? We've got a few. I know that we have a few visitors already, a few people from the attendance that have visited us at Local Motors Microfactory. I invite you to come and visit us if you ever come to Phoenix. We're based about 20 minutes ride from the Sky Harbor Airport. Please come and visit us to see what we do there. Oh, so please come and visit us. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk not about just prices, challenges, but also about co-creation. I assume you know what co-creation is. I just want to have people who knows co-creation, what co-creation is. Oh, not so much. Okay, so that's interesting. Co-creation is a little bit different from crowdsourcing. Co-creation is the act of interacting with a community for solving a problem. It's a little bit different from prices, where you put a brief or a challenge to a community and they come back with ideas to solve it. You actually build the solution with the community, and this is what is really different about Local Motors. So we've got a platform that we call The Forge. This is a place where industrial designers, engineers, fabricators, makers, users, partners, funders are getting together. They are basically the different stakeholders of a solution, and they are getting together on the platform to co-create the solution. So we provide that Sorry? Bring the microphone in. Again, closer? Okay. So this is really the place where people get together. We share the information with Creative Commons license, so everything that we produce is open source. We do that also for customers, and we have some mechanism to allow them to keep the ownership of the IP. But for local motors, if you go to our website, you can download the CAD data of our cars. You can download the bill of material of our cars, and you can get access to the wiki, the how to build the car, and build the car actually in your garage if you want to give it a try. So we haven't seen that happening yet, but we would be very honored to see that. So I'm going to talk about one project that we ran for DARPA about a year and a half ago. The project was the XC2V. This is how we named it with the DARPA team. And it is the experimental crowdsource combat support vehicle. This is what XC2V stands for. Basically, we got together with a team of DARPA people, actually the Service Chief Fellow Program people, and it was a group of 9 people. The initial brief that DARPA gave us was, please design us a military relevant vehicle so that we can prove that such a vehicle can be designed through co-creation. But just a military relevant vehicle is a very broad description. So we refined that into a reconnaissance and recovery vehicle. So in one day, through a scoping session on January 21st, we defined that brief. We worked that with our team and put 2 weeks later a competition page up on February 3rd. We then helped the co-creation process. So working with the community, oh, that's a little bit too far, sorry. We worked with the community, with the Service Chief Fellows, providing feedback to the community, so really iterating on their designs. We then awarded, oh, this is going very quickly. There are a few more things on it, so I'll just summarize. Once we have done the co-creation, basically we had entries. We validated those entries with the Service Chief Fellows, the DARPA team, to make sure that the entries were matching the requirements of the competition. We had the community to pick and choose the winner of that competition. And then once awarded, we took that entry, which was basically a 2D drawing, into a car, fully functional, and delivered it to Carnegie Mellon University in the time frame of 5 months between the scoping session and the delivery of the vehicle. Usually a typical car project, car program would take you 5, 6, 7 years and would cost you something in the region of $250 million to multi-billion dollars type of projects. And we did that in a very limited time frame, 5 months, and a very limited cost for under $1 million. So if I can ask the organization to go through the different iterations, I have a quick facts table on the slide. Thank you very much. So basically the competition in itself ran for 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, we had 552 checkups. So this is boards, drawings, CAD files that the community came up with and posted on the website to gain feedback. We had 159 entries. What is interesting is that those entries are not coming just from the US or just from military people. They are coming from all over the world. They are coming from people that have different backgrounds, that have different history and basically different approach to solve the problem. And this is what is so powerful about co-creation. You make sure that you have the diversity, and then you make sure through the co-creation that the outcome of the competition or the challenge or the project is relevant by refining the project, the entry in the process. The winner is called Victor Garcia. He's actually an American citizen, and he was at that moment looking for a job. He now works for a company called Packard, a very well-known truck company that owns brands like Peterbilt or Kenworth. We delivered the car ahead of time and on budget. which for a military vehicle is kind of unusual. And when we delivered the car at Carnegie Mellon University, we had actually Mr. President Barack Obama to see the car and talk about this project in very kind words. And it was great for us because it was, when I say us, I say Local Motors employees. It was a great achievement for us, but it's also a great achievement for our community. We've got a community of 17,000 community members from 132 countries. And the great thing about it is that a few days after President Barack Obama talked about this competition, we had one of our community members wrote to us and say how grateful he was to Local Motors for putting together this challenge. And he said, when I heard President Barack Obama talk about the 159 people that got involved in this project, I almost cried because I knew he was talking about me. And I think this is what it is about. This is what we stand for. We want to provide our community members exciting, rewarding projects. And this is what we're doing for us, for our vehicles, but also for third-party companies' vehicles. So here are some examples. The first car that you see on the top left is the Rally Fighter. This is a car that we're building in our microfactory in Chandler, Arizona. We built 25 last year, and we're planning to build 100 in the next 12 months. The XC2V is the car that we've just talked about. Today we also have a project, which is the Tandem project, completely community generated. Basically, it's a community member that came to the platform and say, hey, I want to do a tandem, one person behind the other. I want to do that in my garage. I don't have a lot of tools, and I have a budget of $10,000. Who wants to do that with me? And you had a team of 35 people that got together and started iterating on the industrial design, on designing the chassis of the vehicle. And today we're hosting in our microfactory a small lab, a type of hacker space for automotive projects, where they are currently building this car. They bought a 1994 Honda Accord, took it apart as a donor car, and they're building it. We're doing those projects also with customers. On the bottom left, what you see is one of the entries for the Velomobile Challenge. We are doing this, well, we did that for a company called Between, a big company that nobody knows here in the United States. They are the second largest bicycle manufacturer in the world, comparable to Giant or these type of brands. The impact that those projects can have is huge. Here we design a three-wheeler, human-powered, electric-assisted for the region of Milan. They can be producing thousands, hundreds of thousands of those vehicles in the next few years. So the impact is significant. So I just have one last minute, so I'll speed up. We're currently making a competition with Peterbilt, the truck company, thanks to Victor, who got hired by Peterbilt and brought Peterbilt as a customer today to our platform. And we've got more projects in the pipeline with a lot of communication associated with it. So we're looking forward to grow significantly our participation and co-creation level on the platform. We bring to the table some interesting things. We bring partners like OEMs. We bring a community. We bring tools to enable co-creation. And what we want to do next is to put that to work for local regions. So we believe that local is very important because the solution that you're going to design for New York or DC is not the same that you're going to design for Shanghai. So we want to bring that capability of designing a locally relevant ecosystem around mobility for different locations. So we are currently putting together a plan to put that in action, and I invite you, if you're interested in being part of it, to come and talk to me about what we can do together. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Our next speaker, and again we'll hold questions for the end, is Lieutenant Commander Jonathan Kaltwasser, United States Navy. He is a plank owner of the Navy's information professional community and a DEF CON black badge holder. His previous tours afloat include the USS Boone, USS Nassau, and USS Bataan. Most recently, he completed a 3-year tour with the National Security Agency's Red Team and is currently assigned to the U.S. Cyber Command. And he has a very interesting challenge to talk to us about today, the DARPA Shredder Challenge.
Good afternoon. One of the things that Damien mentioned was the Service Chief Fellowship Program. I actually had that honor of doing, it's basically a 3-month internship with DARPA, where you try to experience like the DARPA way of looking at things and doing things. It's interesting because DARPA has got a long history of doing these type of challenges, but one of the things that we had to do in a very short period of time is come up with something that was militarily relevant and yet at the same time met Dr. Dugan's strict requirement that it was DARPA hard. And DARPA hard basically means look for something that it's a bit controversial and at the same time nobody thinks it can be done, and then go out and actually try to do it. So we're only there for a 3-month time frame. So one of the things that we put together based upon the experience of the members that are actually there is 9 of us. We're all 04, 05, basically senior officers in the Navy and all the various services. And we had to come up with an idea of something to do. And one of the things that a couple of our folks that had just done tours over in Iraq was they had the idea of shredding documents. One of the things that's the military does is we find documents that somebody doesn't want the information from them known. And so they do things like shredding them, tearing them up, things like that. And so one of the things that we were looking at was, okay, is that information that's actually on that paper destroyed when you think it's destroyed when you put it through a commercial shredder or something along those lines? And so that was actually the challenge that we wanted to go after was, what are the latest in document reconstruction type of techniques? There was some research in this, but we used DARPA's research team to look into like what the state of the art was, and met with law enforcement, met with the Department of Defense experts that reconstructed documents, and ultimately they came down to, okay, yeah, there is some capability, but it's certainly not state of the art. So we set about trying to fix that. We wanted to come up with a challenge that we can put out to a wide variety of folks. If you just engage one community, say the programmers looking for an algorithm to do this, we didn't think that that was going to be the optimal solution. We didn't know what the optimal solution was. And so what we did was we came up with the idea of we're going to create a mystery that has to be solved. And it's a series of 5 puzzles that were on the screen right now. You can see one of them. Basically, it was a document that was of some intelligence use, and that we had to figure out what the interesting pieces of information are from them. We then basically shredded the document, digitally scanned them in, and then produced those out to the world and said, hey, we've got these puzzles. We need to figure out what the appropriate title being referenced for puzzle 1 is. That's the question that we had. And we wanted to see whether or not anybody was capable of finding out the answer to the riddle. In this case, Leitner was a director of films in 1937. If you look at the puzzle, it's basically answers that riddle by saying, okay, there's only 2 films that Leitner produced in 1937. If you combine that with the comrade statement up at the top, then you know that the answer to this riddle is Tovarich. We came up with this idea of the intelligence because we wanted to see if people could reconstruct a document, but it was not interesting to know that they were able to put every single little chad together. We didn't care about making sure that the chads go together. What we wanted to find out if the information that was on that page could actually be extracted once it was actually cut into little pieces. And let's see, next slide. So this is what we ended up giving out to the vast majority of the folks out there. These things are incredibly small. We used a lot of the techniques that law enforcement uses where we stick it onto paper, put a different color background, and then we scan it in. One of the reasons why we did that is we wanted to remove the variables from the equation. Everybody got the exact same copy of the image. We didn't have to like scan 100 copies of these things and then mail little pieces of paper to people. So we wanted to come up with a solution that could actually scale to a large amount of audience and then put it out there amongst a wide variety of audiences. We actually seeded the idea on a couple of the tech places like Slashdot and Wired magazine and things like that. But it actually kind of grew into a beast of its own. It got a pretty high amount of traffic over Twitter and Facebook, and it really actually got to a larger community than we expected. A housewife actually met me in the airport, and this was after the challenge was over, and I was in uniform at the time, and she actually talked about that she had participated in the Shredder Challenge. She had never known that I had actually been in DARPA, let alone was one of the 9 that actually created it, and yet just a chance meeting actually found them. Somebody that was actually doing this. About 9,000 different teams actually participated. 92,000 downloads of our puzzle was done across the world. It was like 4 terabytes worth of data that was actually sent to all these different people. It was one of the largest challenges that DARPA's actually ran as far as market penetration. We actually got all over the place. People were trying to figure out how to take these little pieces of paper and put them together in such a way that they could actually extract the information from it. And this is an example of one of the individual puzzles. And when you start talking about the design of the puzzles, one of the things we wanted to make sure was, number one, somebody could get it. A prize. We wanted to make sure that we weren't going to throw something out there that wasn't going to be completely possible, but at the same time make it incredibly difficult. So puzzle 1 was only like 230 pieces. Puzzle 5 was 6,000 pieces. And so we never expected anybody to get puzzle 5. But puzzle 4 we actually built in a couple of different cheats into the actual game. There was 5 answers you had to extract from the page that's on the left-hand side. And these are basically the folks that came through and edited a document. Like think a teacher going through and making corrections. There were actually 5 answers that you had to give, and we made 3 of the answers in a different color of ink. So we got red, we've got blue, and green on there. If you can actually go in and look for the various different colors of ink, you can actually gain information from that and end up pulling out that information without knowing what the vast majority of the answers were. So on the right-hand side was the actual winner. This was the answer that they gave. They didn't actually get the vast majority of the information from the page, but they found out who the contributors were by figuring out, okay, it's in cursive versus print. It's actually got different colors, and they're able to actually gain the information from it. That being said, we didn't really put any shortcuts in on puzzle 5. It's 6,000 pages, 3 legal size yellow, really, really tiny writing. They had to figure out how to come up with this solution. The winning team, we thought crowdsourcing was going to be a variable that a lot of people would go after. A lot of the DARPA projects actually have been around crowdsourcing lately, but it turns out crowdsourcing did not work at all for this project. It was a very interesting thing to learn from this. The winning team actually used a combination of methods where they had 3 people that were puzzle solvers that would actually go about putting the little pieces together. And then the programmers that were actually with them would then say, okay, you just put those 2 pieces together, how did you do it? And they were like, okay, well the lines matched up. And so they would generate an algorithm that would basically do that. 17 algorithms later, they actually had a solution that was capable of putting together number 5, which we thought was not possible, in 2 days. And so they designed a system that we actually demonstrated at the prize award. We gave $50,000 to the team that could actually figure out all of the points for individual puzzles. We actually transitioned that information. It's their intellectual property, but the various members of the government that are interested in it were actually there at that final meeting and got to meet them and establish communication. If they want to go on and actually help law enforcement, D&D, whoever's interested in it with the technology, they can. If not, we learned a new technique in blending together multiple different solutions to actually come up with the ideal solution in this case. And that was what was very, very interesting, because based on our estimates, it was going to take at least a year to do puzzle 5, at least a year to do puzzle 5, and they did it in 2 days. And so we definitely learned quite a bit of information as a result of it, as far as what the state-of-the-art commercial shredders can do, and if somebody's determined, they can actually come up with a really interesting way of reversing the information right out of there. And if you can look at that, the only thing that was interesting was the piece on the bottom. It's the dit, dit, da, da. It turns out it was Morse code, is basically what we put in there. And they figured out after they put together the first page almost completely that the dit, dit, da, das were actually interesting. And then they combined that from the 3 sheets of paper in order to figure out the answer to the riddle signed by Proteus. The whole puzzle was all about spy versus spy. And the author of Spy versus Spy was a Cuban by the name of Proteus. And he always signed his comics by Proteus in Morse code at the bottom. And so that was kind of the overarching theme amongst the entire the puzzles. Ended up being an outstanding project. We were only able to do it in 3 months. And we still managed to actually get it done in the time frame that we were looking for, and had results that we were totally unexpected. So it was a definite win for DARPA.
Fantastic, thank you. And we'll go on to our last speaker, and then we'll have time for questions. Hopefully you've been thinking of some. And again, there's a networking break after this panel, so I'm sure some of you will want to talk to the panelists that have spoken today. So our final panelist today is Dr. Melanie Leitner. She's the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Scientific Officer for Prize for Life. Prior to Prize for Life, she served as the Program Officer for J.G. Perpich, a small consulting firm focused on developing and using information technologies to promote collaborations in biomedical research, services, education, particularly the neuroscience and mental health fields. And so the Prize for Life competition was very interesting. I'm going to turn it over to Melanie, and then let us have time for questions.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be back. I was at the 2010 meeting, which was really exciting, and it's amazing just in 2 years where how far a lot of these projects have moved forward. So I guess I'm going to be the health part of the panel today. The project that I'm going to tell you about is really a health-related challenge. And to give you some context on why we decided to do this challenge, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. So the prize I'm going to tell you about is the ALS Biomarker Prize. And for those of you who are not familiar with ALS, otherwise in the US also more commonly known as Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS is a really devastating disease. It's an orphan disease. It strikes about 30,000 folks in the US, about 5,000 a year. And the cause is unknown. It's 100% lethal, and typically it's very rapidly lethal. So from time of diagnosis to death is usually 2 to 5 years. Our founder, Avi Kramer, this is a picture of him, was actually diagnosed at the age of 29 in his first semester at Harvard Business School. And so the impetus, the concept for Prize for Life really came out of, I think, a convergence of sort of, in 2005, 2006, there was sort of this increasing interest in the prize space. There was a lot of focus on that at the business school. And so he really was interested in trying to pioneer whether or not the crowdsourcing prize model could be utilized to catalyze breakthroughs in a biomedical, very complex biomedical space. So obviously there are many reasons to look for cures and treatments in ALS. The disease has been known since 1869, and yet at this time there's only one treatment which has been FDA approved, and it's only modestly effective. It can really extend lifespan by about 3 months. So that's really not, as a new patient, that's really not what you're hoping to hear. So the question is, with such a devastating disease, and sorry I skipped through this on the last slide, but it's also a very expensive disease, costing patients and their families on average $100,000 to $200,000 a year just in direct costs. So why 140 years after the identification of this disease don't we have better treatments and cures? And so just to frame this prize, the reason for that, and I won't go into this in a lot of detail, but often, as many of you in the audience know, innovation in basic research doesn't get translated. So things that happen in labs don't always make it to the patient. And we like to refer to this as the valley of death, the gap between academic research and translation and industry involvement. And so the concept for the prize really came from identifying this gap as a place where we thought a prize could catalyze a major breakthrough. So I apologize for the bullets, but I thought we only had 3 to 5 minutes, so I was going to zip through this. I have a little bit more time to expand. But the concept for this prize, which was launched in 2006, it was a very large prize. This was $1 million challenge, so we were really sort of more along the X Prize scheme in terms of prize purses here, because the challenge was so difficult. What we were really looking for, and again, a lot of folks today have mentioned how important it is to define your problem. And so the way we defined the problem wasn't something like we want a cure, we want a drug, we want something really big. But what we did was define the problem as we wanted a biomarker that was capable of cutting the cost of ALS clinical trials in half. And the thought was that such a major cost saver would really attract the attention of the market, of the biopharma industry. It would make it much easier for any biopharma interested in moving into the ALS space to run their clinical trial, because we were specifically looking for something that they could use to track the course of the disease more sensitively and quickly. We launched this prize in several phases, and I wanted to highlight this for the audience because I think several of the speakers today have also mentioned this, but if you have a very big, audacious prize goal, you don't always have to have that be the only, you don't have to go for all the gold at once. You can phase the development of your challenge. And that's what we did. We decided to first launch a theoretical prize, an idea-based prize, and we simply asked solvers, if you were to go about identifying a biomarker in ALS, how would you do that? And we were quite struck by the fact that the best ideas that we got from the community were, as many others have said, not from the usual suspects. The best solutions came from a plant biologist, a chemist, a dermatologist, and a small biotech. So when you're thinking of a neuroscience challenge, you don't normally think of going out to the plant biologists, and yet that's where the best theoretical solution came from. When we moved on to phase 2, all the marbles, the $1 million challenge, we had 54 teams competing for this prize from 18 different countries around the world. So we were pretty happy because, again, this is, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the space, biomarker identification is very expensive. For example, in the Alzheimer's space, the public and private sectors have contributed over $140 million towards this need. And so we were really happy to get this response from the solver community. We also were pleased by the fact that the prize did catalyze collaboration, and 65% of the teams competing for this prize came from outside the ALS space, so it certainly was effective in attracting so-called new minds. We originally closed the challenge in 2008, and we received 12 complete submissions from 7 countries. Unfortunately, none of them met the very high bar for this challenge, but our judging team did deem that the solutions we had received were so strong that they decided to award $100,000 in progress prizes for results to date. And again, this was for somewhat surprising submissions. One of these was for a skin-based biomarker, again from a dermatologist. So we relaunched the prize in 2009 with the sense that great progress had been made in a very rapid time, and we were getting close to a solution. When we relaunched the prize, we relaunched it as a rolling prize. We had over 1,000 potential teams view the prize criteria, and because we had launched this as a rolling prize, which meant first solution to cross the bar, we actually closed after a year when we did receive a winning solution. And not only did the winning submission meet all of our basic criteria, so we said in order to win the prize, you have to meet 5 basic criteria, but then we had an additional highly desirable and desirable criteria, and the submission also met 5 out of 7 of those. We officially awarded the prize last February. It was really exciting. And just to, oops, sorry. Can someone, this is not advancing. Ah, there. Okay, so this is the biomarker solution. It's called electrical impedance myography. That image on my left, on your right, it looks kind of like a Star Trek tricorder, but that was really the vision. The vision was, can we use a technology that is painless? Can we develop something that's painless, that's quick, where we simply scan over the muscle itself, rather than using needles or other painful measures, which is typically how ALS is diagnosed? Is there something we could do that would be painless and fast? What you see on the bottom is actually the prototype that's now being developed to take this prize into the commercial space. And most importantly, the technology that was developed met our bar. It has the capability of cutting a phase 2 ALS clinical trial in half. So I just wanted to, again, highlight for the audience some of our key lessons learned in conducting this challenge. So I think it's really important for those of you who are thinking about doing these sort of large multi-year or multi-phase trials to know that it's okay to break a challenge up. It's okay to have a big, long-term, disruptive breakthrough as your goal, and it's okay to break that up into smaller pieces and to reward progress along the way. And sometimes that's actually necessary if your challenge is very difficult. It lets people know they're going in the right direction. It keeps the momentum up, and it also gives you, as the seeker, more opportunity to look at the solution space. I also wanted to mention that one of the things that I think we learned from running this large challenge, and we've actually incorporated this into additional challenges that we are continuing to run now, is that you want to lower barriers to entry whenever possible. So obviously, a biomarker is not something you can go about identifying in your basement. There are infrastructure barriers to entry. There are access to patient barriers to entry. There are really high barriers to entry. And when the team was originally putting this challenge together, I think we didn't think enough about that and about these barriers to entry. Because if you want a really large pool of solvers, you have to make it easy for them to actually compete. And so that's something that we really learned from that first launch of the prize that informs all of our current prizes. And then the last thing is to maintain momentum, especially in these multi-year challenges. You need to make sure that the solvers are getting information, getting feedback, potentially getting recognition, including small prize dollars along the way. But for something that's over a long term, you want to make sure that the folks who are originally excited and invested in the challenge continue to remain invested in the challenge.
Great, thank you very much. That's a great panel. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists. Four exciting challenges, and I have some questions for the panelists, but this is really for an interactive session for the time we have. So if you have questions, please come up to the microphone. There's one kind of up in the front and one sort of in the back. So any questions from the audience you'd like to pose to the panelists, anyone on the panel? I see one forming. Yes, there's a microphone right there.
For Melanie, I got a question. How did you transition from the small prize to the bigger prizes? What happens to the intellectual property, and how did that original solver, who may not know how to do clinical trials, get involved?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So again, in hindsight is 2020. So we provided those $15,000 small prizes for the theoretical. In hindsight, that was maybe not enough to keep all of those solvers invested, although they did all continue to attempt to translate their solutions. So we were really blown away by the fact that particularly the dermatologist who got one of the milestone prizes, he went out on his own, identified collaborators in the ALS space, brought together the dermatology community and the ALS community, found his own funding, and commenced a small phase 2 trial on his own. Now that was pretty extraordinary, and we, in hindsight, should have realized that would have been more of a barrier for current challenges that we're running now. We do provide more upfront resources, so I would recommend if you're trying to do something along that line that you intercede a little bit more actively after that theoretical phase to match people up if they can't, because not everybody can do what that dermatologist did, or you provide greater, your initial prize seed money is really seed money, so it's a larger prize. I will say that the chemist that got the $15,000 did continue on very actively pursuing his solution and actually has built his whole research program around that solution. So I think that small money can be a huge incentive, but when you're talking about things in the biomedical space, and especially in the clinical trial space, I think we needed to be more active, and that was definitely a lesson learned for us.
Great, thank you for that. Other questions from the audience? Okay, I have one for Dr. Das. My question is, how did you identify the problem you wanted to run and what impact it would have? How did you decide of those problems? How did you pick them?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think problem selection is one of the key things in running challenges. So we had actually done some experiments 4 or 5 years ago. In 2006, I think, 2007, when we first got into the business of open innovation, and we were new to this. So clearly we had trouble in problem selection. So after that experience from the past, we partnered with Innocentive, and the way we did it is we ran multiple workshops. We brought in a variety of people in a structured workshop where ideas were thrown about, people discussed, is this good or not? And then from there we came up with, in the initial set, about a dozen problems we said might be promising. But that was just the first round. Then using our own laboratories, we then took those problems and started looking at, are the solutions already available, structured that, decompose the problem, figure that out, and you start finding out that some of them really don't make sense for open innovation. Some of them actually comes out of solved problems. So you suddenly start finding solutions you didn't know existed because you are decomposing the problem and starting to looking at it in a systematic way. And then coming out of that search, and of course the provider, in this case Innocentive, is working with you all the time. We found the ones which we wanted to proceed. And so we started getting very high success rate, about 70% of them being solved. And the ones where we didn't solve it, there were clear issues we had in our team, which could be factored in. So if you do your homework right, I think you have a very high success rate in this area.
Great, thanks. And we mentioned that in another session, that doing the homework before the problem is really key. So I'm not sure who was first. I wasn't looking. So let's go up here and then to the back.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about eligibility. America Competes Act specifically states that only United States citizens are available or eligible to participate in challenges. And in all 4 challenges that you described, you stated that people from many different countries were able to participate. Can you address this issue? So how do we overcome this challenge for government? I represent National Institutes of Health, and if we eliminate participants from any other non-United States countries, basically we are addressing our typical audience. So nothing is changing for us as a granting agency.
Exactly. That was actually something that we had a major problem with. The prize authority that we've got goes through the Pentagon, and the Pentagon actually stipulated that the winner had to be a U.S. citizen. And one of the things that we were struggling with in the course of the execution of this challenge, in a crowdsourcing situation, how are you going to certify that everybody in that crowdsource was part of a U.S. citizen or something along those lines? And most of the time, all we know is these people are email addresses or something along those lines, and we won't actually not know that information as the runners of the challenge. We're just going to know the team that whenever they register, they have their point of contact information, and so we'll have one person. And so that was one of the things that we actually stipulated explicitly in the rules, and then further in a frequency asked questions section, that the person that we hand the check to has to be a U.S. citizen. But if it's other folks that are with them, that's up to the team lead to basically figure that piece out, how they're actually going to give the information or give the money out, divvy it up or whatever it is. But we had to have, based upon the current rules, that the winner be somebody that has a tax ID number that we could actually give over to government and make sure that. But that was definitely a major problem that was addressed a couple of different times, and it was probably the most common question. It turns out the folks over in Russia really love to solve puzzles. And so that was probably the largest amount of non-US people that were participating in the Shredder Challenge, was actually all the puzzle solvers that were over there trying to figure out how to involve themselves. And the best thing that we could say is we made sure that we had a forum that was there that they can communicate on. We had hashtags in Twitter, reach out to somebody, partner with one of the other teams, or make some way, shape, or form that they can actually talk to somebody that had a tax ID number that could be the leader of the team.
And I'd like to mention one more thing too. I don't know in the morning session, but there are other authorities to run prizes, or to run competitions, I should say. So I would encourage you, there was an OMB memo, I think March of 2010, goes over a number of authorities that you can use to run challenges, of which America Competes is the most recent. But for instance, for the NASA pilots we ran, we used Procurement Authority, and so there are other authorities you can use. So there's a question in the back. We may have time for 2 quick questions if we can get them in. So.
Okay, sure. This is a question for anyone on the audience, on the panel. A good thing I see from all of these challenges is that you get lots and lots of solutions. So you get a lot of innovation, which is great. But the thing is, even though the competition is sometimes what spurs all those ideas, only one or very few, a small percentage of the participants actually wins. So I'm wondering now, from all this knowledge and wisdom that's been created through your catalysts, how do you capture that so that the world doesn't lose that, right? Some of these solutions might have 10% of themselves that are really good, and you have 100 or 1,000 solutions that have 10% that's good. How do you still retain that and create collaboration around that?
Oops. So I think we're in a little bit of a unique position because we're a nonprofit. So what we did was we actually asked the solvers, are you comfortable with us publicly sharing information about your solution? So not the solution itself, but descriptions of the solution. And everyone we asked was completely willing to do that. But we were also in a unique position because we did not claim any IP in the competition itself. And so I think for those where there is an IP issue, it's much more challenging.
One more. Oh.
I'd like to add something also.
Okay.
I think there can be also some construct to overcome this. Instead of awarding a prize to one person or to one team, then you award a prize to everybody that has participated in the project, in the co-creation approach. And this is what we're currently working on at Local Motors, and other companies are providing as a solution to overcome that.
Okay, great. We have time for one really quick question.
Elizabeth Kittredge with HHS, and question for Melanie or anyone that's done a challenge in the clinical space. How do you ensure that your solvers comply with human subject protections and animal welfare protections?
So for purposes of our challenge, that was actually part of the submission that they had to give us. So they had to actually show that they were, or they had to, I mean, just like with a grant, applying for a grant, they had to show their compliance. So we didn't ourselves actually go out and verify that independently. I know that this has come up with others I've talked about interested at NIH in doing this prize-based mechanism, but I think it's similar to a grant. So you can get the assurances, you can get the signatures, you can get IRB, a letter of support. You can build all of those things into your challenge requirements to meet those requirements.
Well, again, thank you to the panel. It was a great panel. Let's give them another round of applause.